So two interesting things have happened right around the same time. New iPad Pros have come out, and it's been a year since I've had to stop editing video on my iPad. I had to move on from doing that. I did it for about 4 years, and I had to move on due to some issues and bugs with the app I was using. So I wanted to do something a little different for my M2 iPad Pro review. I wanted to kind of basically make a follow-up on how I'm using the iPad in my life and in my work, but also how the M2 iPad Pro can play a role in that. This video is sponsored by Anker. When I started working from the iPad, that was right around the time iOS 9 came out. It was super interesting because it brought multitasking and keyboard shortcuts and picture-in-picture to the iPad. At that time, I was spinning up a blog. This is where the Untitled site came from. And I wanted to just write about, apps and productivity stuff and all sorts of different Apple things and stuff like that. So I wanted to use the iPad for that writing process. I've mentioned quite a bit, I have ADHD. I really struggle when it comes to focusing. And at the time, I had a MacBook Pro, and I really struggled with having a ton of different stuff open. It was pulling my attention all the time. I wanted a device that was a dedicated writing machine, and that's what the iPad started off as for me. And then as I started using the iPad more and more, I found interesting apps I really liked. The OS was really, it was up and coming. It felt like the early days of computing where we were pushing things. Shortcuts wasn't shortcuts at the time. It was still a third-party app called Workflow. And we were really seeing how far we could push the iPad. It was just a really fascinating time. And then the next year, in 2016, that's when the Mac kind of started to have its downhill time. That whole 2016 to 2020 time, basically everything pre-M1 chip, the Mac wasn't exactly at its best point. That's when the butterfly keyboard happened. That is when, MagSafe got taken away on the MacBook Pros. The MacBook Pros that a lot of people didn't like came out, the touch bar, things like that. The Mac was kind of really starting to go downhill, and a lot of people were looking at the iPad as this ultra light and portable computer that had amazing battery life, cellular options. It was getting multitasking and interesting features and had a really rich app ecosystem around it. So I, like a lot of people at that time, just started working from my iPad full-time. That became my full-time computer. I went from writing to making YouTube videos, and there was a transition period in there where I was using a MacBook Pro to edit videos, but it was February of 2017. That was when I went full into the iPad, because that's when I discovered LumaFusion and was able to edit all of my videos to, up until about a year ago now, on my iPad. And it was 200 videos or something like that. It was a good chunk of videos. After I discovered LumaFusion, my MacBook Pro got put into a drawer, and I would take it out occasionally. But for the most part, anytime I needed to do something with a computer, whether it was write an email or edit a video, I would grab the iPad. This video is sponsored by Anker. This is the Anker 541 USB-C hub for the M series iPads. This is the ultimate multitasking hub for the new iPads and iPadOS 16. It has a USB-C port that supports up to 5 gigabits per second transfer speed and 60-watt power delivery. There is also a USB-A 3.0 port with 5 gigabit per second transfer speeds, an HDMI port that supports up to 4K, dual SD card readers, one standard and one micro. This is an amazing hub to keep in your travel bag. It gives you a variety of different ports in a small, compact design. If you're looking for a docking station for your M series iPad, this is the Anker 551. The world's first USB-C hub that's also a foldable stand designed for the iPads. This is an 8-in-1 tablet stand. It comes with a short USB-C cable so you can keep your cable management clean. It supports up to 100-watt charging pass-through via USB-C. It also has 2 SD card ports, both standard and micro. On the back, there is an HDMI port that supports up to 4K at 60 Hz. This is great with iPadOS 16.2, which will give you full external monitor support when that ships later. On the side, there are two USB-A 3.0 ports. These have 5 gigabit per second transfer speeds. There's also a headphone jack as well. The stand folds at the base and at the top, so you have custom viewing angles. This is an excellent stand for anyone working at a desk with an M-series iPad. Both of these products are extremely well made. They use aluminum, so they match the look and feel of your iPad. I'll put links in the description below to where you can check them out. My thanks to Anker for sponsoring this video. So we covered kind of my history with working from the iPad and why, but what am I using the iPad for today? And there's a whole bunch of stuff, but like the main focus of it is a productivity machine, a place where I can sit down and get my work done. So a big part of my work is writing. I write scripts for these videos. I write a lot, but I do a lot of writing, and with that, I use the Magic Keyboard. Now, the Magic Keyboard was introduced in 2020. We haven't really seen any major changes to it, but overall, I like it for the most part. I would love to see it get like a function row and a bigger trackpad, but unlike the Magic Keyboard Folio that was introduced with the 10th gen iPad, I do not ever want to see it get a kickstand. I don't really like kickstand keyboards for the iPad. I've tried a bunch of them. My issue with them is they're not stable to use when in your lap, and they take up a lot more space than something like the Magic Keyboard or like a traditional laptop style keyboard case. One of my favorite features about using the iPad for writing over something like the MacBook Pro for writing, other than the fact that it's just like really light and portable, is there's no fans. I like writing in bed. I know I shouldn't do it. I know I shouldn't work in bed. I know it's like not healthy for your sleep patterns and all that stuff. No, it's not. I like doing it. With the MacBook Pro, if I'm setting it down on a blanket, the fans could get covered up by that blanket, could cause it to overheat, do some serious damage to it. With the iPad Pro, I don't have to worry about it. Now, there obviously is an exception in the Mac lineup there. The MacBook Air, that one does not have any fans, but I don't personally own a MacBook Air, and I'm not going to go out and buy another computer just so I could write in bed. The other aspect of writing is external monitor support. So this is something that will be shipping in iPadOS 16.2, so check to see if that's out, but when this video initially launches, it will not be out though. This gives you true external monitor support. This has been something we've been asking for as a community for years now. It's here. I'm very excited about it. It's really nice to be able to like plug my iPad into a desk setup, into a monitor like the Studio display or the LG monitor that you saw in the Anker ad. Either one of those like works really well with external monitor support on the iPad. You don't have to use like the 5K Studio display if you don't want to. And with external monitor support, I'm just able to work at a more ergonomic desk setup. So I'm able to have my mechanical keyboard that I like. I can have an extra trackpad. I can have the iPad off to the side and my monitor in front of me, and I can work, you know, sitting upright instead of hunched over like I was working at the iPad or even a laptop. I often get asked, like, how do I put up with the ergonomics of working at an iPad for a long period of time? It's the same as a laptop. One thing that I have found very fascinating about the iPad, going back to the original iPad Pro, is the iPad has really embraced modularity. So on its own, you have a tablet. Then you could add the Apple Pencil and you have a notebook. Then you could put it in a keyboard case like the Magic Keyboard, but there's a ton of different options. You could put it in the Magic Keyboard case and it's a laptop because you have a keyboard and a trackpad. And now you can plug it into an external monitor and you have a desktop. And that modularity aspect has been really appealing to me. I'm not somebody that likes to own 50 different computers. Like, I don't want something, I don't need something for all these different use cases. I really just want one computer that can adapt to the way I want to work in that moment. And for me, that's what the iPad does. Another thing I do a lot, and this won't surprise anyone, is email and messaging. So I use the built-in mail app, and I actually pay for a service called SaneBox. And this does a lot of like filtering for me. Like when new messages come in from somebody I've never talked to, they get put into a special folder. I can put a message in what's called the black hole, so I never see messages from that sender again, which is really nice because I get so much spam email. It is ridiculous. So like I can do all that sort of stuff. And one aspect of the iPad that kind of plays into that is cellular. So I like to get out of my office because I obviously I film everything in this office. I edit everything in this office. So when I'm dealing with like business tasks, when I'm signing contracts, dealing with email, writing scripts, I like to get out. I totally will be that person that goes and works at a Starbucks. But having cellular is really nice. Yeah, most places like Starbucks have Wi-Fi, but it's really annoying and usually slow and sometimes broken. I just don't even worry about that. I can go work in a park. I can go work outside anywhere. We have a little park at my complex here that I can go work at. I've done it a couple of times in the past, but I don't do it too much anymore. Just because I feel weird. Like I feel like everyone's watching me. Don't like that. But my point is, the iPad, where something like the Mac, the iPad has cellular, and that is so incredibly nice. In a couple weeks, we're going to be doing a big family trip down to Disneyland, and I'm going to sit in the back of my brother's truck and work. And because the iPad has cellular, I don't have to worry about like, okay, what work can I do offline and online? Another task that I do with my iPad is reading, research, and note-taking. This is where the new Stage Manager feature comes in. Now, I did a big old walkthrough on iPadOS 16 already, and there's some stuff I like about Stage Manager, and there's some stuff I don't like about Stage Manager. But one of the really nice things about Stage Manager is on the iPad, you can now have up to 4 apps displayed at a time. I do wish they would raise that. I really wish there would be no limit at all, but that's a whole different discussion. But this means I can have like my RSS client up. I can have Pins, my Reading Later app up. I can have Spring, my Twitter client. And I can have Craft, my note-taking app up. I can have all that stuff up, and I could be writing away. I could be, in Safari, going through apps in the App Store, whatever, and be taking notes and be jumping between all of those different apps. That's really nice. Another aspect for me for working off the iPad is project management. Obviously, I do video stuff. I'm also working on some other projects as well, and I manage all of that from the iPad. I use apps like Airtable and Things to really bring those different pieces together, really keep track of what is where. Another thing that I've gotten really into lately is mapping out projects, but with the Apple Pencil, especially this time of year. This time of year is especially busy for all tech YouTube, but especially Apple YouTube. Starting with like the iPhone announcement, then you get like iOS release, iPhone release, and then like a whole bunch of other stuff. So like there's a lot happening, plus there's other videos I want to make as well. So I've been using the Apple Pencil and GoodNotes, but now I'm kind of like starting to move into Freeform now that that's in the beta. But I've been using this to like map out different ideas, like what I want to feature in each video, tips and tricks in each video, stuff I might need to order for a video. Like if say I'm doing like a desk setup video or something like that, like, hey, you need more cable management ties or something like that. Like that is the kind of thing I've been doing with the iPad that I really enjoy. I'm not an artist. Like I can't draw I can't draw Darth Vader or something. I literally have a Vader right over there. That's why I thought of that. I can't even draw a stick figure, but I can write, sort of. My handwriting is atrocious, but I can write and understand my own personal handwriting, and that's where the Apple Pencil is really nice for me. Then I start to get into more creative workflows, like editing photos. So I edit all of my photos in Lightroom. There are a lot of great photo editing apps on the iPad. I just like Lightroom. There's not really any particular reason. I just feel like what I know about photo editing translates really well in Lightroom, and it gives me the best results of an edited photo. Now, that being said, I really wish Lightroom would add keyboard shortcuts to their iPad app. I do not understand why those are not there. But I edit all my photos in Lightroom, especially like one-off photos. I edit those on my iPad. Every once in a while for like thumbnails and stuff, I'll move it to Photoshop and add text. I don't do a lot of big stuff in Photoshop, so the iPad's version of Photoshop is fine for me. And the way I pay for Lightroom, I get Photoshop for free. So that's why I kind of use Photoshop. Affinity Photo is more full-featured than the iPad version of Photoshop. I really want to see the iPad version of Photoshop get to desktop class. But this is where something like the mini LED display on the iPad Pro, the 12.9-inch iPad Pro specifically, comes into play. That is a gorgeous, gorgeous display. Like the colors are very vibrant and stuff, so it looks really nice when editing a photo and even editing video when I've done that in the past. Speaking of editing video, that's the last aspect of using the iPad I want to talk about. So when the M2 iPad Pros were announced, it was announced alongside that DaVinci Resolve is coming to the iPad. I talked in another video about how DaVinci Resolve is a true professional video editing application. Like this is used on TV shows, commercials, documentaries. This isn't just like something like YouTubers use. To me, and people are going to get mad at me for saying this, I see Final Cut as like the YouTuber video editor, and DaVinci Resolve is kind of like the like, hey, I'm bridging the gap between YouTuber and commercial and documentary and production shoots, and then you have what's called Avid way over here. That's what your Marvel movies and Star Wars is edited in. But with that coming to the iPad, I'm very excited to like try editing video again on my iPad. I genuinely miss being able to edit video on my iPad. Having to jump between multiple machines is not something I enjoy. I would love to be able to have my entire workflow back on one machine. So I've never used DaVinci Resolve for any production work. Like I've never put something out in public. I played with it a little bit here and there. I still need to like understand some more of the core of it. So I'm going to be playing around with it a lot more. And especially once it officially comes out for the iPad, obviously I'll be doing that, and I'll make some follow-up videos on like how it works and my thoughts on it. But really, we need to see more variety of pro apps on the iPad. This is the place where the iPad is lacking the most. It clearly has the power to run these pro apps. It has the same chip that the Mac has now. It can have up to 16 gigs of RAM. There's no reason not to see pro apps come to the iPad. And honestly, Apple needs to lead the way with their pro apps. Final Cut, Logic, Xcode, those need to come to the iPad. The other thing I really want to see is more ports on the iPad. Ports are important, especially if we are going to start getting more pro applications. Being able to charge your iPad while plugging in external drives and card readers and stuff like that is really important. And battery life as well. We have had the same quote-unquote 10 hours of battery life on the iPad since the very first iPad. I would love the iPad to get more. I mean, look at something like the MacBook Air. That thing gets just bonkers battery life, and it has the same chip. So I would love to see the iPad get more battery life in the future, go beyond that 10 hours. So I talked about all this creative stuff I do with the iPad and project management and all this big stuff, and that's great, but not everyone does that. And where the iPad really shines is like a general computer. So if you need to like grab your computer to pay a bill or order something, the iPad's perfect for that. Now, obviously you don't need like an iPad Pro for something like that. It is nice, don't get me wrong. And I'm not here to tell you you can't do that. Like you absolutely can if you want to, you just don't need it. The original pitch of the iPad was it sat between your Mac and your iPhone as just like an easy to use device. And it's just became one of those things that like people like me, that's like, we saw that and we're like, oh, hey, could we just push it a little bit further? And then we pushed it a little further and a little further and a little further. And we've gotten the iPad a lot further because of that. I honestly believe if people weren't treating the iPad as their main computer, we wouldn't have things like Stage Manager or cursor support or external monitor support. So to me, the iPad is a clear productivity machine for my use cases. Now, for other people, it can be something different. But for me, it's a lightweight machine that can be almost anything I need it to be. It can be a tablet. It could be a notebook with the Apple Pencil. It could be a laptop. It could be a desktop with monitor support. Like that stuff, it can be what I want it to be. It can be a transformer of devices. It also has an excellent ecosystem of apps. And for me personally, it's a much more focused device. So I can use features like Focus to strip away, excess stuff, strip away notifications from people or applications. It allows you to set focus filters so certain content and certain apps will be displayed while it's hiding other stuff like mail accounts or calendars. And you can really limit what is on the display. Now, all of this is possible on the Mac and other devices. I will give credit where credit is due, but it is so easy to do on the iPad to just have a singular device be like, hey, my task right now is to knock out 100 emails. It is really easy to just sit down, open a mail client on your iPad, and bust that out. So what's my plan for using the iPad in the future? Well, the short term depends a lot on how DaVinci Resolve is. If it has the features I need, which aren't a lot, like I am not a complex video editor by any means. If it has all the features I need, honestly, I do not see a reason why I won't move my editing workflow back to the iPad. The iPad be like my main and only computer that I use for my day-to-day. And honestly, that's what I want. And really, if I could take it a step further, what I really, really want is Apple to bring Final Cut, because I really like Final Cut as a video editor. It's fast, it's clean, it works extremely well with the way my brain works and the way I edit. But that's a whole separate video. Bigger videos though, like my iPadOS 16 walkthrough, that video, the folder that contained all the project files, all the video clips and all that stuff was 1.6 terabytes. So obviously I wouldn't be able to work on that on the iPad. The biggest iPad is 2 terabytes, and like my base storage with like documents, music, photos and stuff is about 500 gigs. So that just wouldn't work. So what my plan is right now, if DaVinci Resolve is good and meets my needs, I will sell my MacBook Pro, get a Mac Studio that's similarly spec'd, but it would be cheaper at that point, make it my always-on computer, so I have a computer for automation and doing like background uploading to YouTube and like backup services and stuff like that. And then on top of that, use it for bigger projects like those iPadOS walkthrough videos that have, more than a terabyte of footage. So let me know in the comments below how you guys are using your iPad and what your future plans are. I'm really curious to hear about that. Thank you all so much for watching, and my thanks to Anker for sponsoring this video. If you liked the video, hit the thumbs up button, subscribe if you haven't already, and have a great day.